Kicking off the card here, we got Tatsuro Taira making his return to the UFC, taking on the debuting Jesus Aguilar. And you see the line here, we got a minus 1100 favorite price tag for Tatsuro Taira. And, I can't really recommend a bet on it or anything, but it's hard to disagree with it. I feel like Aguilar doesn't really have a lot of outs in this fight. This is going to be his debut coming off the Contender Series. Taira, he's had 2 fights in the UFC already, had 2 good performances, and overall he's 12-0. And when you look at both these guys' fight styles, Taira, super long-rangey guy. You see in this fight he's going to have a 7.5-inch reach advantage. And his striking is getting better. He's throwing some nice straight punches, setting up the head kicks with the right cross, and he's moving around a little bit better and being a little bit more active. He could still struggle against pressure fighters with good takedown defense, but he hasn't really encountered that too often yet. And with Jesus Aguilar, he's more of a grappler, which I think is going to play right into Taira's favor because Taira likes to go to the ground. But on the feet, Aguilar seems just pretty raw. Like, he'll throw some big punches, but isn't really very technical. I definitely think Taira's the advantage there. And then Aguilar does have some power. I mean, maybe just in the pure power department, he could have an edge on Taira. But outside of that, I think Taira's better technically. And in terms of the wrestling, Aguilar may have a slight advantage. But if he goes and tries to take Taira down, unless he can just hold him on his back, which I think is going to be extremely hard to do, then he's going to be in trouble. Because I think if Taira gets on top, he could finish him. Aguilar in his last fight was able to go in there and have a war with Erison Ferreira. But I think that Taira's a little bit higher level than both those guys. And if it goes to the ground, Taira's really slick, good transitions, nice back takes, heavy ground and pound. He's actually one of these guys that has a good submission game, but his ground and pound is there as well, and he uses it to set up his submissions, and he could finish with it like we saw in his last fight. So I think Taira is going to get the job done. I don't see him getting tired here. One of the things that Aguilar weaponizes is cardio and a pace, and I don't think that's going to be something that he can use to beat Taira. I just feel like Taira is a composed guy. And until they bring him into that next level of competition at 125, I think he's going to be able to get these wins. So they're setting up here for him to get a victory, obviously, as you see him as this huge favorite. So I think Taira's going to go in there and get the job done, win inside the distance, and defeat Jesus Aguilar, probably by TKO with ground and pound. And up next here, this next fight's going to be awesome, man. We got Jeong Yeong Park coming back here. He's going to be taking on Denis Tiuliulin. Both these guys, they go in there and they're game to go to war, man. It's really fun when either of these guys show up in the octagon. Jeong Yeong Park, he has a really nice jab. He does a good job when he can work off that jab, pressure forward, and set some combinations up. Throws some pretty slick 1-2s. His boxing is solid. He'll mix it up, body, head. And he has okay wrestling. We've seen him show it off, but most of the time it's came against lesser grapplers. I feel like in this fight, he's going to want to try to get it to the ground because he doesn't have that big knockout power, even though he's slick and he can land some, nice shots off the back foot and nice shots off the front foot. He pushes a high pace. He tends to sometimes get in wars because fighters don't really respect his power. They'll just get in front of him and try to out-gunsling him. And I feel like he's a little bit small for 185. And Denis Tiuliulin, he's one of those guys, man. He goes in there and he wants to get right in your face, pressure you. He is extremely calm and composed, and I do think that he's a little bit slow, but he's a big guy. He's going to be significantly longer, significantly taller than Park in the octagon, and his composure and just ability to keep that pressure, take shots early if he has to, even though he keeps a very high guard and usually defends a lot of the shots. He just wears people down with his pressure and composure, and he has real good hands. He has nice 1-2s. He keeps it real tight, real technical. And then on the inside, he has really nice ability with his elbows, with his knees in the clinch. And he's down to sit in the pocket and brawl. And he has that big power. He has a crazy chin. And his pace is also something that he weaponizes and really uses to break fighters and put him out down the stretch. So I feel like this fight's probably going to play on their feet. I think Park may try to get some takedowns. Maybe he'll get 1 or 2 early. But Tiuliulin, he had a lot of early losses against Russian fighters, taking him down, holding him down, and you see that he's improved with that, even though he did get submitted against Kizraev in his UFC debut. He had a good first round there, and then second round just kind of got caught in a rear naked choke. But I don't think that Park is just going to be able to go in there and take him down at will. Most of the time when I've seen Park get takedowns outside of the John Phillips fight where he took him down in the clinch, it's been off catching kicks. And Tiuliulin, I don't think is going to give him that opportunity very much. I think he's going to use hands and pressure and not give him that many options to catch a kick or anything like that. So I feel like it's going to be more of a stand-up fight. And we've seen Tiuliulin, really force these wars and get the better of him most of the time. And with Park, I've seen him get finished in a couple of these fights where he's facing a fellow high output pressure fighter, like his fight with Anthony Hernandez, his one of these other fights, Gregory Rodriguez, where he got knocked out in that one. Even the fight with Eric Anders against another pressure fighter, that was a very questionable decision there. So I'm going to go with the upset here and pick Denis Tiuliulin to get the win in this one. I think he's going to be able to keep it standing, use that pressure, create that war that he usually does, get in that chaos. I think he's going to be the bigger guy that hits harder, that's a little bit more active. I think that Park's not going to be able to really set combinations up off that jab because Tiuliulin's going to be giving him too much to deal with. And I actually got to go with Tiuliulin by knockout, so I'm going to say Tiuliulin gets the second round KO TKO in this fight. And with this next fight, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one. Pretty low-level fight between Jeong Kim and Mandy Böhm. Two girls on losing streaks. Mandy Böhm is 0-2 so far in her UFC run. She hasn't gotten a win yet. Pretty big underdog in this one at plus 210. And then we have the minus 260 favorite in Jeong Kim, who's on a 4-fight losing streak, which, you see a minus 260 on a person that's lost 4 fights in a row. I would never condone betting on that one. But, I actually like Jeong Kim's style. She's someone that's been in the UFC for a long time at this point, and obviously she's had some losses, but she's been fighting some really good girls. She fought some girls that are in the rankings. She fought Alexa Grasso, who's fighting for the title, and she always brings it. She comes forward, she throws a lot of volume, she has good boxing, and she gets in slugfest. And Mandy Böhm, so far in her UFC run, has faced 2 girls that basically just dominated her, really. She hasn't really shown much, and she needs to have a good performance here. She's 33 years old. And both these girls are 33, so they're a little bit older, but Böhm definitely needs a win, and if she ever wants to win in the UFC, I think this is her last chance. And really for Jeong Kim, too, even though she's already gotten a couple wins in the UFC, if she wants to stick around, I think this is a must-win for her. But just the way both these girls fight, Böhm mixes it up a little bit more. Like, she'll try to clinch, and she'll mix in some takedowns, but her grappling and wrestling is pretty low level. It's especially defensively, we've seen now that she can get taken down and held down pretty easily. And she is okay striking, kind of like that SBG-style striking, pull counters and slick striking. But I think Kim is a little bit better, throws a little bit more volume. She's longer it's not significant, but I think that could be a factor here. And I just think Kim's going to throw more numbers. She's faced a lot more higher-level opposition, so I'm going to lean towards her getting the victory here. But ultimately, total pass in my opinion. I don't think you can trust either woman to go out there and perform. And if it goes to decision, we've seen both girls are kind of sketchy when it gets in that scenario. So I'm going to go with the fighter that's had a little bit more experience against the upper echelon, that's been able to win in the UFC even though it has been recently, and that's Jeong Kim. So I'm going to pick her to get the win here by decision. Up next here, we got a fight for the Road to UFC Tournament Finals between Hyun Park and Seung Choi, and it's 2 streaking guys. Both these guys are on win streaks, and it should be definitely competitive. I feel like both guys are well-rounded. They mix it up. As far as striking goes, Seung Choi has good footwork, feints, but his offense is mainly single kicks. He doesn't throw that much volume. I feel he's going to be outstruck just on volume alone. His hands, I don't really see him using them very often, and I don't think he's going to be able to defeat Park in a stand-up battle with kicks alone. Park is more dynamic, he's more aggressive, he's a little bit more flat-footed, but he's fast, he's athletic, he stands tall, so he moves in and out pretty good, and he has the better hands, and I think his leg kicks and kicks on the outside in general are going to play a role in him winning if he does win. And if this fight is mainly stand-up, I think that Park's going to be able to edge it on points. He did get dropped in his last fight, Park, but that was against a Muay Thai world champion, and I don't think Seung Choi is on that level in the striking realm. Seung Choi to win this fight is going to have to hit doubles or clinch takedowns, and if he can do that, then he will have a solid chance to win because his control is good, he can grind it out, but to me, he isn't the most elite wrestler or grappler, and I think Park is slightly better in the transitions. I don't think Park's going to come to this fight looking for takedowns, but his athleticism, his takedown defense are going to make Choi have to strike, I feel like, and if Choi shoots a bad or telegraphed takedown, Park has an uncanny ability to find the back, and the finishing upside is definitely with Park. Choi primarily wins via decision. The cardio department is where Choi could possibly have the advantage. He has more experience in longer fights, and Park has been finishing a lot of his opponents in round 1 recently. Choi's never been finished, so I'd be surprised to see Park take him out of there in the first. So I think it's going to have to be a longer fight for Park this round, or this go-round. And Park, he's only been in decision 1 time, but I think he looks in shape, and he should be able to go the distance. So at 125, I feel like going to decision and knock Asinov is probably a good bet. And at this point, I feel like he's probably just the more dynamic fighter in this matchup. I see him having the better offense. I think he throws more volume. So I feel like I'm going to pick him to win via decision. Choi's going to be trying to wrestle here. I think Park's going to negate a lot of that. He might even get the back at one point. And I think he's just going to be a little bit better, a little bit more active on the feet. And I see Hyung Park getting the win here by decision. This next fight, this is a fun one. It's another interesting one here with Rinya Nakamura taking on Toshiyami Kazama. Another Road to UFC tournament final here. And Toshiyami Kazama hasn't fought in a while, so he's had quite a bit of time to prepare for this date. And having looked at who was on the other side of the bracket, you would have think that he would have expected this match with Rinya Nakamura, who's been the favorite to win this whole time. And he had a fight scheduled for the last fight, the last card where Rinya Nakamura fought and all these other guys fought, but his opponent missed weight, so that fight got scrapped and he just got moved immediately to the final. He did win 1 fight to make it through in the tournament. It was against a pretty good opponent too, actually, a good wrestler that has some power, that was an experienced veteran, but he's a big underdog in this one against Nakamura because Nakamura is someone that was a gold medalist at the U23 national freestyle wrestling tournament. He is, or not national, world freestyle wrestling tournament, and he's someone that was probably going to be a Olympic wrestler for Japan in the 2020 games if COVID didn't mess that up. And when that happened, he decided to transition to MMA, and he's done well, going 6-0 since, and he has dominated really most of his fights. He went to decision in 1 fight, but I believe he's finished all his others. He's gotten some first-round finishes. Both of his wins on the Road to UFC tournament were first-round finishes. And he's shown some power as well, so he's not just a one-dimensional fighter. He's definitely been working on the striking. But it's an interesting one here because Toshiyami Kazama is a big underdog, but I think he's a pretty good fighter as well. He has great pressure. He's constant clinching. His jiu-jitsu is really good. So it's going to be interesting to see if Nakamura is going to want to bring it to the ground or if he's going to want to keep it standing and strike and try to knock him out like he did his last opponent. And I do think that his last one is a little bit similar to Kazama, a kind of herky-jerky guy with a lot of good feints that wants to eventually get it to the ground. And he did shoot on Nakamura, who stuffed it pretty easily and was able to eventually get the knockout later in the first round. And he did seem like he wanted to keep that fight standing. But Kazama is someone that, you know, on the feet, he is low volume. It seems like he doesn't really open himself up too much. Sometimes he'll throw some okay overhand or some punches that seem like they're pretty accurate and they sting his opponents, but I wouldn't say he's necessarily a very good striker. It seems like he's defensively responsible, but that's about it. And he is fast, so he's probably going to be decently hard to hit, but I think Nakamura is going to be throwing with the more ill will, and he's also going to be the fighter that is a little bit more active, aggressive, and pushing the stand-up. But the thing is, Kazama is constantly clinching, and it's going to be interesting to see that dynamic here with Nakamura being that really, really good freestyle wrestler, if he can kind of negate that clinching, or what he's going to do to be able to create that space to strike, or if he's going to want to tangle on the ground with Kazama and mess with that jiu-jitsu. But I feel like Nakamura is going to be able to eventually figure it out. I mean, he's the big favorite for a reason, because he's the more explosive fighter with more avenues to win this fight. I think he has the more finishing upside, and he's shown that he has a good top game. I feel like he has the awareness on the ground to negate a lot of the sweeps and things that Kazama does, and probably be able to just use that top pressure to keep the position. I don't know if this is going to be one of those fights where he's going to be able to do much damage on the ground if he gets it down. Probably going to have to worry about kind of a lay and pray game plan, and then on the feet try to sprawl and brawl and get the knockout, or try to negate that clinch. But Kazama's a difficult guy to deal with, man. I feel like Kazama could stick around in the UFC too, but both these guys are tough, man. I feel like they're going to have a future in the division, And I'm going to go with Nakamura here. I'm going to say he gets that first round KO TKO here, just blitzing him and getting him out of there early. If he doesn't, I think it'll be a fairly competitive decision, but I think Nakamura is going to have a lot more top control. I don't think he'll get submitted or swept, and I think that Kazama will eventually either get tired or just be too content staying on his back and looking for submissions or sweeps, and that'll give Nakamura the win. But I'm going to actually go with the other way, like I said, and pick Nakamura by first-round knockout. But either way, I'm going to go with Rinya Nakamura to get the win in this fight. In this next fight, we got Zha Yi taking on Jeong Yeong Lee, and this is another Road to UFC tournament final. And this is a good one. I like both these guys. It's kind of a young gun, and Jeong Yeong Lee taking on an established veteran in Zha Yi. But the thing about it is Zha Yi, even though he has 24 fights, Lee has 10 fights. He's actually younger than Jeong Yeong Lee, 26 to 27, so it's not a big difference. Both these guys are approaching their primes. But Jeong Yeong Lee, great athlete, super entertaining. He definitely brings the action. He goes for the finishes. In the Road to UFC tournament so far, he's gotten 2 really fast finishes. And his style is reckless, but he tends to get the job done. He pressures forward, hands pretty low. He looks to back his opponents up, and he stands right in front of him. And he will be kind of low volume if fighters don't throw first out of him, but he uses the jab, some leg kicks, and tries to feint, draw a lot of attacks. And from there, he'll counter with big 1-2s, 3-2s, body hooks, uppercuts, knees up the middle. And he's super fast, super sharp, accurate. He has big power, so he can make a lot of fighters hesitant to throw, not want to exchange with him. And he's hittable himself. He just sits in the pocket and he invites exchanges, gets into war. So he can get clipped at times, and I have seen him wobbled and dropped, but super tough. And when he gets stunned, he just bites on his mouthpiece and tries to get it back. And he has good cardio, and he tends to kind of get tired and get second wins and break guys. That's what I saw in a couple of his decisions. But he is someone that's, just really hard to get out of there, so brawling with him and is just not smart. You have to be tactical against him on the feet. And he stands tall, so his takedown defense is a little bit questionable, Jeong Lee's. I've seen him get put on his back in a few fights pretty easily. He is explosive. He's hard to hold down early. Nice armbar attacks. We saw him hit that armbar really early against Ben Ji in their Road to UFC tournament fight. But in this fight, he's going to be facing one of, if not the best grappler and wrestler that he's ever fought. And that's something that he most definitely will need to be cognizant of in this fight. Can't go wild. And I've yet to see a fight where someone hasn't been able to really just blanket Lee for rounds or get in dominant positions against him on the ground. So Lee is going to be trying to sprawl and brawl. So we're going to kind of see how that plays out. For Zha Yi, very experienced guy, like I said, 21-3, and that's a tremendous record. And a lot of his wins haven't been against the best competition, but he's garnered a lot of ring time. And he's more of a grappler, but he's well-rounded as well. And on the feet, he's fast, good in and out. He has nice patience. And that's going to be key against Lee. He has to use his footwork to pull into his jabs, his counter crosses, and then ultimately his takedowns. And he has nice front kicks, round kicks. Sometimes he doesn't really set his kicks up the greatest, so I would try to use punches mainly in this fight to avoid getting countered. And he can't get in a firefight or stand in front of Lee at all. He has to be always, moving on the outside or on the inside. And he usually does that. He fights smart on the feet. And he's a good wrestler and grappler. Good timing on his level changes. Good clinch takedowns. On top, he has good back takes. His rear naked chokes are on point. His last fight, he was facing a really good grappler. And they exchanged position for a lot of the fight. But he was able to be the more dominant guy. And he should be dangerous and active on bottom as well in that fight. He got really close to getting a triangle. And his get-up game, his scrambling ability is really, really good. He has great cardio in that department as well. He pushes a hard pace to keep. And if he can get his wrestling and grappling game going in this fight, then he has a great chance to pull the upset. And to me, this is a close fight because Zha Yi is a difficult style matchup for Lee. Lee's a really big, tantalizing fighter because he has that power, sniping ability, his aggression and capability to take damage, to give damage, really makes him stand out. But I think he's going to struggle with Yi constantly moving on the feet. And I think that, Zha Yi is going to be able to land some counters and then get some takedowns as well. And I think he can get the job done here. So I feel like it's going to be a close decision. I think Zha Yi is going to be able to maintain his gas tank better because I think he's going to force some grappling exchanges. I think he's going to get some top control time. And I think as the fight goes on, he's going to start to even do better on the feet as well. Maybe not be able to outstrike Lee for long periods of time, but I think he'll be able to make it much more close and then ultimately get the takedowns and get the victory here. So I got to go with Zha Yi here. I'm going to pick him to get the upset, and I'm going to pick him to win via decision. In this next fight, I think we got the lowest level fight on the Road UFC tournament final so far with Anshul Jubli taking on Jeka Saraghi. And Anshul Jubli, he was a late addition to the tournament. He only had to win one fight to make it to the finals, and then he did it by a slim margin. He edged out Kyung-Po Kim via split decision, and this is going to be the biggest fight of his life. He's going to be debuting as a UFC fighter. He's 6-0 in his pro career, so he's going to be looking to keep that momentum going. And I believe he's currently the only Indian fighter in the UFC. And he's a big lightweight who's going to be much bigger than his opponent on fight night. And he stands tall, he has fast hands, but his striking is really not great. He doesn't move his head, flat-footed, stiff. He does have fast hands, good jab, nice right cross, check hook isn't bad. He'll throw some decent body punches, but I feel like Serghei is much faster than him, and I think Serghei's leg kicks could be an issue for him as well. He has to try to push the wrestling in this fight for sure, and he could potentially land some nice clean shots after getting Serghei tired, because he throws more straight shots, and sometimes Serghei does start to loop punches. But, I think that going to the ground would be the best option. He has shown a good chin, and he's shown solid power, but he's very physical. Good job he's doing striking the pressure forward into the clinch and hit takedowns. And from there, he does a good job of transitioning from position to position. He has good control, nice mount. He worries more about keeping the position than finishing the fight, and the majority of his wins are via decision. So he has good cardio, and he can grind you out. Big guy for the weight. And Jeka Serghei is a striker on the feet. He's explosive, fast, powerful. He has momentum. He's coming off 2 highlight reel knockouts. In my opinion, he's a little small for lightweight. He's probably going to be optimal at 145. But his speed gives him an advantage. He's very explosive. He'll throw fast leg kicks, body kicks with the rear leg, lead switch kicks. He does a good job blitzing in with punches. He'll attack the body. When fighters pressure him, he can pull counter pretty effectively. He showed that in his last fight where he got a nasty one-punch KO off the back foot. And he's creative with the striking. I've seen him mix in some flying attacks, spinning attacks. He landed a spinning back fist in his fight against Pawan Man, which finished the fight. His defense isn't the greatest, and he does tend to get tired and become more open and more hittable. But fun, wild style on the feet, and especially when he's fresh, he's going to have a big speed advantage and probably be able to light Jubli up if it could stay standing. But his wrestling and grappling is a little bit questionable. As I said, he's small for the weight. He got tired against Pawan Man after some grappling exchanges, and Man was really low level in my opinion. And Serghei has okay body lock takedowns, but he can be clinched and bullied a little bit. Takedown defense looks average at best. He doesn't seem very good off of his back, so definitely needs to avoid getting taken down in this fight. And this fight's a pass to me. I agree with the line. I see pass to victory for both fighters, but I'm personally going to pick Jubli. I think he can use his size to get in the clinch and a couple of takedowns, get Serghei tired, and then make the striking more competitive. And I think he has a better cardio, which is what's going to give him the win. I think that Serghei's probably a little bit better fighter, but I think he's going to be undersized, and I think that's going to be a big factor. And I think he should go to 145. But I'm going to go with Anshul Jubli by decision in a pretty low-level fight here. And with this next fight, we got Yusaku Kinoshita. He's taking on Adam Fugitt. This is going to be in the welterweight division. And Yusaku Kinoshita, Japanese prospect. This is going to be his first UFC fight. 6-1. One loss was a DQ for grabbing the cage. All of his other wins have been finishes. And that one DQ loss is kind of comical. I mean, he finished the guy with stomps to the face, which was legal, stomps while his opponent was on the ground. But he was grabbing the cage while he's doing it, so he got DQ'd. But his last win was a first-round knockout on the Contender Series. That was his first fight in the United States. And since then, I've seen that he's stayed over here. He's training at Sanford MMA, or he's been there for a little bit. And that should help him quite a bit, because you do notice that a lot of fighters that come from Japan to the U.S., it didn't factor in for Kinoshita in his first performance, but they tend to struggle with that travel, so it just takes away that factor entirely for him. But Adam Fugitt is set for his second UFC fight, and this time he's in a much more tenable situation. His first UFC fight, he came on short notice against a high-level prospect in Michael Morales, and made a decent account of himself. Even in a loss, he was making the fight fairly competitive before he got knocked out in the third round. And at 34 years old, this is his final chance to win in the UFC most likely, and he's in a do-or-die situation here. But Fugitt is a solid fighter. On the feet, he's a southpaw, long, rangy. He's going to have a 6.5-inch reach advantage, and he comes with a lot of blitz attacks. He's good at pressuring. He'll stay in opponents' faces and look for that check hook when they look to back him off. And he's good in exchanges. He can land some nice short shots. His defense leaves a lot to be desired, though. Hittable. He invites wars and can fight not so smart. And throws a lot of volume, keeps the pressure, and hits hard. But that opens him up to be countered. And if a fighter gets tired, then he will take him out. And most of the time, he's finished 7 of his 8 wins inside the distance. But he's gotten knocked out himself more than once. And for Kinoshita, he's going to be the more dynamic, technical, and powerful striker. Switch stance guy, good footwork movement. He moves in and out of range and can manipulate that distance. And very explosive, accurate. He's quick, powerful. He likes to dart in and out with blitz, switch stance combinations. Okay kicks, but primarily pull counters, left hooks. And the blitzes really for Kinoshita. And he does a good job controlling distance. He doesn't get hit too much. This fight, he's facing a super long guy, so we're going to see how he navigates that. He had that same kind of thing in his last fight. He was fighting a real tall fighter, but I feel like Fugitt is a little bit more experienced, a little bit better at using that reach. Kinoshita does get tired. Seems like after the second round of his last fight, he got a little bit gassed, but he, is going to be able to probably bank on getting a lot of first-round finishes if he wins because of his explosiveness and his knockout ability. He has 4 knockouts. And for Fugitt, in terms of grappling, I feel like he's the superior wrestler and grappler in this fight and probably needs to use that. He uses his striking pretty well to position himself for his body locks and can get deep in with the double underhooks with his length. And he's going to want to mix it up and test that wrestling and grappling game of Kinoshita here. Test the gas tank. One thing that Fugitt does have is good cardio. He pushes that pace. And he's not an elite grappler. He doesn't really have that best top control, but I feel like he has the better skills in that department. He does have a few submission victories. And Kinoshita's wrestling is really an unknown. I haven't seen fighters try to take him down in many fights, and I haven't seen him shoot in on anyone to get it to the ground either. He does have some amateur wins by submission. He has one front choke win, one rear naked choke win as a pro, and then all of his amateur wins were armbar finishes. That makes me believe maybe he has good submission skills when fighters take him down, but you can't really say. I mean, it's hard to know what level those opponents are at, how he got those arm bars or anything like that. But the 2 pro fighters that Kinoshita submitted both had losing records in his pro career. And his one loss, like I said, came through DQ, so he's technically undefeated, I would say. But this fight, to me, is going to play out close unless Fugitt gets knocked out. I just feel like has the better skill set, but for some reason I can't get myself to trust his chin. I've seen too many times him make mistakes, leave a chin exposed. I saw him get knocked out against Kalen Hill, and then once again in his last fight, I've seen him get dropped in some of his other fights. So if this fight goes long and Fugitt can get his pressure and more importantly his wrestling going, he could upset Kinoshita, but I think that Kinoshita is going to be able to get the victory here. I think they need to bring him along slow. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of ring time. He's finished the majority of his fights really early. He's fought a lot of Japanese fighters. He hasn't really faced that many different styles or fighters from different countries. And, this is going to be the first American, I believe, that he's fighting. So if Fugitt could take some shots on the chin early, he could maybe take it down the stretch. But I'm going to say that Kinoshita gets the knockout in the second round here and is successful in his UFC debut. And this next fight here between Choi and Kyle Nelson, it's another fight where I feel like both these fighters' jobs may be on the line. Choi is making his return after over 3 years away from the sport, and at one time, he was one of the biggest prospects in the world, but in 2023, he's just trying to save his spot on the roster here. Currently on a 3-fight losing skid. He hasn't won a fight since July of 2016, and I don't know what's the longest time in between wins for fighters who were in the UFC the whole time and didn't get cut and come back years later, but Choi may be looking at one of the longest span between wins in UFC history if he can get it done on Saturday night. And if you just look at Choi's wins, I mean, it paints a picture of how long ago it was. He beat Sam Cecilia, Thiago Tavares, Manuel Puig. None of those fighters have competed in the UFC in the last 5 years, and they've been cut from the promotion long ago. And Choi's losses have been against good competition, and Cub Swanson, Jeremy Stevens, who are two older veterans kind of at the end of their careers, and then Charles Jourdain, but he's gotten knocked out twice in a row. He's coming off a bad shoulder surgery, which required a long layoff. Even before that, he wasn't active due to his military service and some other things, so it's difficult to trust Choi. And this is certainly a step down in competition, though. He's facing another fighter in a similar situation to him, and Kyle Nelson, who's 1-4 in his first 5 UFC fights. So Kyle Nelson, he joined the UFC in 2018. He's fought 5 times. His competition level has definitely been high, but there's been a reoccurring theme in his fights where he starts fast, he pushes a 1-round pace, gets tired, and then finished. The one fight that he won, he got to finish early, and that's been the story of his entire career in the UFC. He has not won a fight that's gone past the first round since 2016, where he won a split decision over Jonathan Brookings. His last fight, he went up to a lightweight, and he was able to go to a decision even though he lost. All his other UFC fights where he lost, he was finished, and I think a lot of that was due to not cutting weight. I think he cuts way too much weight to get to 45. He's a really big guy, but he decided to go back down to that weight class, and we'll see if it benefits him or not. But when you look at Kyle Nelson and you look at his style, I mean, he has a good jab, good straight right hand, and good counter left hook, step-in knees, decent leg kicks, round kicks to the body. I've seen him throw a left hook, right uppercut combination, and he comes out fast. He definitely has power. He also is an okay grappler. He doesn't really push the wrestling, but he has a good reactive double, heavy elbows when he can actually get on top, and good rear naked choke. I feel like in this fight, he's going to have to either really get in good shape and bank on the wrestling or catch him early, because I don't see him really doing well in a long-term striking fight with Doo Ho Choi. Once he gets tired, his kind of finesse and his ability to strike goes out the window. He becomes more and more wild. His volume goes down. He becomes more hittable, and it's just going to fall apart for him. So he either has to get that knockout early or come in the best shape that he's ever been and be able to strike sharp or get takedowns and do that. But I think it's probably going to have to be an early thing for Kyle Nelson to get the win in this one. And Doo Ho Choi, he is coming off 3 losses in a row, like I was saying earlier, 2 TKOs in a row, shoulder surgery. So right off the bat, you just have to wonder where his head's at, how he's going to perform and things like that. But at 31 years old, he's not like he's, super old or anything like that. And even though he's taking a lot of damage, the time off could have potentially helped him there. And he's definitely the better striker. I mean, the guy's real slick on the feet. He has great leg kicks, big power in his hands. He throws that piston right hand right down the middle. Nice check hook, fast combinations. When he hurts you, he swarms you and goes for the finish. And he, early on when he's fresh, is very, very, very effective. He controls that distance, slides in and out of range, hard to hit. But the thing with Choi is if you can kind of get past that early barrage, take some shots, and get him into those later rounds, his defense becomes leaky, man. You'll start to back up, and he never moves his head, and his movements become a little bit slower, and you can catch him when he's moving backwards and start to touch him on the chin, and we've seen him get clipped and hurt and finished. So I feel like his chin maybe is not what it used to be, or maybe isn't as great, and he's going to have to just be more responsible in this one, start to kind of adapt his style a little bit potentially. But I feel like in this fight, if he can survive that early barrage from Nelson, which I think he can, and keep it technical, chop the legs, attack the body, try to slip in those big punches, counters, then he probably should be good and should be able to get the knockout in this one. So I'm going to give Doo Ho Choi the benefit of the doubt and say that he comes back and gets a win for the first time in a long time here. So I'm going to go with Doo Ho Choi by second round KO TKO in this one. And this next fight, I don't really got a lot to say about this one. Marcin Tybura and Blagoy Ivanov. It's a heavyweight fight. Both these guys are respectable heavyweights. They're in their rankings, but they tend to have some slow, kind of boring fights. And I feel like this might be another one of those against Ivanov, unless Ivanov can just catch Tybura on the chin and knock him out. But Tybura is going to be the significantly bigger fighter in there. He's going to have the 5-inch reach advantage, 4-inch height advantage, and it seems like his striking has at least gotten a little bit better. He's going to be the faster fighter, and he's going to be trying to control that distance with the long punches and the kicks, but we all know what Tybura wants to do. He wants to push you against the cage, he wants to time the takedowns, get on top, maul you, get you tired, and either find that finish on the ground or win by decision. And Blagoy Ivanov, he's known for southpaw boxer. He has some power. He has decent power in his hands. Like I said, decent counters. His sharpness in his boxing is pretty good, but he's lost a lot of speed, and he's extremely tough. I mean, you can hit him with sledgehammer to the face. He's gonna eat it, and he could just stick in the fight. And he's pretty good at controlling that center, circling away from the power side, and not getting backed up too much. And he has good takedown defense. He's a former combat sambo world champion. Decent front choke submissions. It seems like his clinch game is pretty good. So I think it's going to come down to just who's a little bit more active on the feet. I feel like Tybura is going to be able to use that size a little bit to push Ivanov against the cage. I know Ivanov has that combat sambo background, but he did get taken down by Derrick Lewis, and I've seen him controlled against the cage by other lesser grapplers, and I feel like Tybura has that ability to do that here. I think that Tybura, just with the size, might be able to edge it out in the speed advantage, but I think Ivanov could potentially land a clean shot and hurt Tybura and swing the fight or knock him out, and I think it's close. I feel like the line movement where Tybura was a pretty big favorite and now it's close to even money is probably correct, because Ivanov is tough to take down, and if you can keep it standing and win some of these clinch exchanges, it could be a really close fight, and I do think that he has the more upside to get the knockout, but ultimately I'm going to pick Tybura by decision. I'm just going to bank on him to use his speed and his length advantage on the feet to stay safe and stay a little bit more active, and then I think his cardio is going to hold up better if they do a lot of clinching and cage pushing, and I'm going to say Tybura wins in a close decision. And just like most of the card in the co-main event, we got two more untrustworthy guys with Jung taking on Devin Clark. At least with these two guys, we've seen a lot of them in the UFC. Devin Clark has been in the UFC for a long time. Jung had quite a few fights in the UFC now at this point. And Jung was on a long winning streak up until his last fight. He did have that draw mixed in there with Sam Alvey, which isn't a good look in hindsight, but he got knocked out early in his last fight against Dustin Jacoby, and he's going to be looking to rebound from that. He's a pretty big favorite here against Devin Clark, who seems to be a perennial underdog in these fights and kind of a guy that wins one, loses one, hasn't been able to find the momentum in the UFC yet, coming off a loss once again to Azamat Murzakanov. And when you go back and look at that fight, though, he was winning the majority of the fight and then got knocked out in the third round. And Devin Clark is a guy that he has a lot of physical attributes. He's a really good wrestler. He's physical. He's explosive. He has power. He's definitely a high-level athlete. His cardio is on point. But he can just get a little bit spastic. He lacks that fight IQ. And his chin isn't there. He doesn't like being hit. And it seems like he can give up on himself at times. He's gotten a lot better with that. And his toughness has really shown in some fights. You look at that fight with Iwan Kudalaba, his ability to battle through and make a decision there was very impressive, but he still has had issues with that in the past, and he's just not the best striker, just real wild striking, uses his explosiveness, and even though his cardio is there, once he gets a little bit more tired, because no one's going to have that same cardio for the full fight that they have in the first round, he just can get real sloppy. And even early on in fights, he can be sloppy and get caught. And Jung, he's someone that I haven't been super high on, but he's real big for the weight, 6'4". And historically, Devin Clark has had trouble with these long, rangy guys. If you look at a lot of his wins, they've came against shorter, stockier fighters in the division. And a lot of his losses came against these long fighters with long reaches and tall frames. So it's not really stylistically someone that Devin Clark has done well with build-wise, but Jung, he is pretty much a boxer. He has a really nice jab. He uses that jab to set up the combinations, fast hands, switch stance, throws real nice crosses down the middle, kind of a sniper-like fighter, and that is someone that could potentially give issues to Devin Clark because he's going to be looking to land those, kill shots down the middle. He has nice elbows as well, and the one thing about him, though, is his takedown defense is really untested. I wasn't really super impressed with him in his fight with Kazama Ibragimov in his UFC debut, where he was taken down a couple times and he was held against the cage and he was facing a really wild, spazzy guy like Devin Clark, but I feel like even more low level, and eventually Ibragimov gassed himself out and Jung got the front choke. But since then, Jung has not really fought any guys that are good wrestlers or grapplers. They've all been willing to strike with him, and that's Dong Jung's kind of forte. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can stop Devin Clark from holding him against the cage, from taking his back and controlling him, and mat returning him, and putting him down and laying on top of him from a half guard or something. And if he can keep it on the feet, I think he's going to have a good chance to snipe an elbow, snipe a counter straight, and get the knockout. And I think as the fight goes on, I think Jung is going to stay a little bit more composed. His cardio is good. And I'm going to pick him here just because stylistically Clark has had trouble with these long guys. And Jung is someone that is a sniper. He's shown power. He's gotten a lot of first-round finishes. And I think if he can land a big elbow, big cross right on Devin Clark, he could knock him out. But it's kind of a dog or pass situation to me just because I feel like Clark could grind him out and get the decision win here. I'm not totally sold on Jung yet either. He's coming off a knockout loss. Both these guys are, but it's Jung's first loss and first knockout loss in a while. So I don't know if that's going to affect him mentally. And I feel like Clark's going to come in at least how he always does. So I'm going to go with Jung, but this is a fight that I think it's dog or pass. And I'm not super confident, but I'm going to say Dong Jung gets the knockout in the first or the second round. And in the main event here, we got Derrick Lewis taking on Serghei Spivak. This was a fight that was supposed to be the main event of a card last year, but Derrick Lewis had to pull out on the day of, which is a little bit sketchy. Derrick Lewis has done that a few times, so you never know, when his career is going to come to an end, because he's been extremely active in the UFC. One of the most active heavyweights of all time. He's definitely, I believe, in the top 5 of most heavyweight fights in UFC history, and he's one of the best heavyweights of the last few years, man, at least the most winningest. And I think he's teamed up with a new camp. He's gotten in really good shape. It seems like he's very motivated to turn it around this year and get a victory in the UFC, not lose 3 fights in a row. And Serghei Spivak, he's the big favorite in this one, which I'm pretty surprised to see he's over a 2-1 favorite. He is on a 2-fight win streak. He's won 4 of his last 5, but when you go and look at those guys he beat, there's nothing really that impressive about it. You beat Jared Vanderaa, who, I don't know, I don't really see him as a super high-level fighter. Greg Hardy, who's in a different sport now. He beat Augustus Sakai, who's in a long losing streak. He had a win over Alexei Oleinik, who's like 55 years old. Personally, I just don't understand this line. I get that Derrick Lewis has lost 2 fights in a row, but he had that banger with Tai Tuivasa where he was on the verge of winning multiple times and then ended up getting finished himself, and then the fight where he got caught early against Sergey Pavlovich, which Pavlovich has been running over everybody. I just don't get how those 2 losses make him a huge underdog against Spivak. I get that Spivak's style could potentially give him issues with the wrestling, the pace, the boxing, but I don't see Spivak being a smaller heavyweight, just being able to go in there and bully Derrick Lewis, take him to the ground at ease. We saw the best wrestler in the division against Derrick Lewis not get 1 takedown against him in Curtis Blades, and he ended up knocking Curtis Blades out. And I feel like with Serghei Spivak, I think that his value is getting a little bit overinflated because he's been having these really good performances against these lower level guys, where Derrick Lewis sneaks up on people because he's not the most technical. Right now he's on a losing streak, so even more so than usual he's sneaking up on you. And I just feel like his skill set doesn't really look out at you because it's not really that vast, but he just has that equalizer with his power and his explosiveness, man. And I feel like we've seen Serghei Spivak struggle with explosive guys that go out and go for the kill early. Walt Harris got him early. We saw Tom Aspinall get him early. And I feel like Derrick Lewis definitely get the knockout here. I just don't see Serghei Spivak taking him down and holding him down, getting him tired and finishing him on the ground. I don't think that he's going to be able to just outstrike him. I feel like Derrick Lewis may get taken down a few times, but when he wants to get up, he's going to get up like he always does. And I think that when he wants to blitz in on Spivak and really put that heat on him, I've seen Spivak wilt behind that on multiple occasions. And I know some people look at, he beat Tai Tuivasa. Tai Tuivasa is similar to Derrick Lewis, but Derrick Lewis is much bigger. Derrick Lewis, in my opinion, is the better grappler, even though Tuivasa beat Derrick Lewis, and Derrick Lewis isn't known to be a good grappler or wrestler. I think he's better than Tuivasa is. And Derrick Lewis, in my opinion, is the better athlete, more explosive. And I just think Derrick Lewis is going to catch this guy and knock him out, man. I'm going to go with Derrick Lewis by first round knockout. I think that he has good value as well. I think him by knockout, him to win on the money line is both bets that probably are going to hit in my opinion. And I'm going to roll with my guy Derrick Lewis on this one, man. I think he's going to be able to go in there and run Serghei Spivak over. I'm going to say he wins in the first round here. I think Spivak may get one takedown early in the fight. I think once Derrick Lewis gets back up to his feet, I think Spivak's going to kind of be a little bit weary, and I think Lewis is going to catch him and knock him out. And even if it doesn't happen early, I think it could happen late. Even though Lewis's cardio has been maligned, he's been able to get quite a few late finishes in his career. And I just think at some point, with this being 5 rounds as well, Derrick Lewis is going to catch him. He's coming in more optimal shape, and I think that if he does look really good on the scales, then I'll be even more confident. But yeah, I just believe that Derrick Lewis is going to get this job done, man. And at the underdog price tag, I think that he definitely has some value. So give me Derrick Lewis in this one. I'm not sold on Spivac from beating this lower level competition, guys. I think Derrick Lewis would run those fighters over as well. And Spivak's going to have to prove to me that he can beat this level fighter, this explosive fighter with power, a bigger heavyweight. So give me Derrick Lewis here to win by first round knockout. And yeah, guys, that's the full breakdown for UFC Vegas 68. Thanks for watching. And besides that, if you want to go on the patreon.com, this week it's a big week. We got Bellator 290, which is a great card, man. I mean, Bellator has to do a better job moving forward of promoting their cards, because two championship fights with Fedor versus Ryan Bader and Anshul took off versus Johnny Eblen. We got a stack card. Lorenz Larkin's on the card. Neiman Gracie's on the card. Sabah Mossy, Henry Corrales. We got Carl Albrechtsen versus Grant Neal. Darian Caldwell's on the card. Jordan Lugo. I mean, there's a lot to really, really get into on this card that you like. And yeah, so if you want to get a full card breakdown prediction video for that, go over to Patreon. I already have a few bets up. I got a bet for Bellator 290. Got a couple bets for UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Spivac up. And yeah, as far as the parlay of the week goes for this card, I'm gonna go with Hyun Park here as one of the parlay pieces, and I'm gonna go with the other parlay piece. I'm gonna go with Dong Jung. So Hyun Park, or not Dong Jung, excuse me. I'm gonna go with Hyun Park and Kinoshita. So Hyun Park and Kinoshita as the parlay of the week. But ultimately, I mean, if I was really gonna do a play, I always give you guys a parlay of the week, but I would just do a play on some of these underdogs. Like, I feel like there's some underdogs with some value. Like, I think Derrick Lewis has a little bit of value, or quite a bit of value. I think Yizaz has value. I see Tiuliulin having some value. So there's some people that I think have some value. I think Hyun Park has some value, even at the minus 180. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching this video. Hit the like button. Put a comment down below. Let's try to blow this one up with a little bit more comments, a little bit more likes. And besides that, I'll be back on the channel talking to you guys later. I think I'm going to do a live video on Friday. So if you guys could make that, that would be cool. I'm going to be kind of looking at the weigh-ins, reacting to that, and then give a betting breakdown. So come on Friday, you want to ask some questions and talk about some of the bets you have and get some answers from me. You could definitely put them down in the chat. But yeah, guys, peace. Talk.